To start with, I'm very sure that majority of you are aware of the numerous development challenges affecting Africa. Different African countries are struggling with the issue of infrastructural deficit. On the one hand, the existing infrastructure, particularly the physical infrastructure on the continent, they are largely insufficient. And the extent of the insufficiency of the infrastructure on the continent varies from country to country. Some are doing relatively better than the other on the level of infrastructural development on the continent. Aside the issue of insufficiency of the existing infrastructure on the continent is also struggling with the issue of aging infrastructure, meaning that the level of insufficiency of the infrastructure in Africa will exacerbate within the next 1 decade if the aging infrastructure are not replaced. Another major issue, development challenge constraining Africa, facing Africa, is the problem of poverty. And currently, the largest economy in Africa, which is the Nigerian economy, that economy is considered the place that houses the highest number of people in poverty in the world. And poverty is one of the reasons why we have a lot of international development agencies all over the place in different African countries doing one activities or the other. And it's possibly one of the reasons why Africans are not really respected across the world. The problem of poverty is also linked to the issue of corruption, another development challenge affecting the continent. Corruption is not only pervasive in the continent, it's also endemic. It's something that African countries has been struggling to deal with over the years. As if all of these are not enough, the continent is also faced with the issue of ecosystem degradation, which will pose enormous challenges to the continued survival of the economy and the effort at making Africa overcome its development challenges. On the list as well is the problem of ill-equipped and understaffed health system in different African continents. As a result of the problem of civil internal crisis, as a result of the problem of terrorism, as a result of the problem of all sorts on the continent is facing to different degree in different countries, different humanitarian crises. We have the issues of internally displaced persons on the rise on the continent. We have it in places like Somalia. We have it in places like Sudan. We have it in places like Nigeria and a couple of other places where they are dealing with the issue of insurgency and civil internal unrest. As a result of the underperforming agricultural system on the subcontinent, the problem of poverty, corruption, food security also makes the lead of the many development challenges affecting the continent. Just like unemployment is considered a waiting time bomb on the continent that is largely youth populated. And the population of the continent is also increasing. As the population increases as well, we've been observing massive movement of people from the rural area to the urban center, thereby complicating the likelihood that Africa's development challenges will further go in the negative direction. If the population that is moving from the rural to the urban center is not adequately planned for, both in the areas of infrastructure and the economy base that is necessary to sustain their daily needs and livelihood systems. And on top of this is the issue of underperforming educational system of various magnitude, and that is pervasive across different African countries. It's this aspect of the educational system that I'm going to focus on in my conversation with you today. And my argument up front is that at the core of the development challenges facing Africa is the issue of underperforming educational system. Because my thesis is that if the educational system in Africa is doing as it's meant to be doing, it's producing those scholars that will elicit the development of the continent, that will take on the problems affecting the continent and advance solutions to them based on the base of sciences and sound knowledge production. It's very possible that these problems are solvable, because the purpose of education is to produce problem solvers, people that will take on problems and advance solutions to them, people that will take on problems and turn problems into opportunities that will elicit the manifestations of the potentials of the continent. Is that the case currently with the educational system on the continent? I don't think the argument is no, as we shall come to see in my presentation. And to make this argument, I think it's very important that my presentation actually commences with an exploration, a dense, laconic, and informative exploration of the current outlook of education in Africa. And I'm going to start on the positive note, because it's not only a story of negative, a story of challenges. It's also a story about some positives. And one of the positives about the educational system in Africa is that Africa has one of the highest enrollment primary education rates, according to UNESCO. Currently, Africa has more than 80% of pupils enrolling into primary educational system. And the implication of this is that we have more children going to school in Africa. At the same time, we need to put this data in context by being mindful of the fact that many children are currently out of school in Africa for different reasons that we possibly shall come to discuss in the course of my presentation. A good deal about higher primary education enrollment rate in Africa is that it means potentially, if more people get into primary or elementary educational system, we should be hopeful that that will affect the enrollment rate at the secondary school or high school educational system in Africa, or that likely to improve the enrollment rate at the tertiary educational system in Africa. But is that the case in Africa? This is what I'm going to discuss next. What we've been able to find out from the existing data in Africa, from the on-the-ground observation in Africa, is that while the enrollment rate on the continent at the primary educational level is on the high side, we observe a lag in the transition of those high population of pupils at the primary educational level, moving on to secondary and tertiary educational level. And in fact, existing data suggests that lesser people get into secondary educational system in Africa, and much more less people get into the tertiary educational system in Africa. And specifically, it's been observed that about 28% enrollment rate is observed at the tertiary and secondary educational system in Africa, compared to the 80% enrollment rate that is observed at the primary educational system. And that leaves us with a deficit of close to 42%, of close to 52% deficit, meaning that about 52% of those who enrolled at the primary educational system in Africa don't make it to the secondary educational system and the tertiary educational level in Africa. And the bad news is this: Africa has one of the lowest secondary enrollment rate in the whole of the world. And this is primarily for many reasons, including the fact that most of those that made it to the primary educational system hardly make it to the secondary educational system. Some of the specifics about the data are these: 4 out of 100 children in Africa that complete primary education, secondary education, make it to graduate and postgraduate institutions on the continent. With this meaning that a big percentage of those kids who started from primary school never made it to higher institution. And we need to be asking ourselves, what are the development implications of this? Because these are potential manpowers potential problem solvers will say education either stop at the primary educational level or will say education stop at the secondary educational level without having the ability to acquire top-notch education, education that will prepare them to be problem solvers, education that will prepare them to contribute meaningfully, build the capacity to drive the education and the process of solving the problem of development affecting the continent. And when you compare this data on the continent of Africa with the data that is coming from Latin America, you begin to see a abysmal difference, huge difference, a mongrel difference between the number of people that actually make it to higher education in Latin America, which records 36 out of 100 people, and in South and West Asia, which records 14 out of 100 people, 14 out of 100 people. You can begin to see. And the bad news also is this. Apologies for that. The bad news also is this. According to the OECD, it's been reported that 80% of the kids all over the world that started an education at the primary level are more likely to acquire tertiary level education. When you look at the sub-Saharan Africa, when you compare the global data with sub-Saharan Africa, it's only 6% of those kids who started an education at the elementary level that is able to make it to the tertiary educational level. And it's telling us that a huge percentage of African citizens who are meant to proceed to acquire higher education are not able to do so. And I want us to have this at the back of our mind, because I'll be coming back to this picture that I'm making argument that I will be coming back to these issues at the call of my presentation, possibly along the middle part of my presentation. Another thing I also want us to think about, it's not just about the secondary and tertiary educational lag in Africa. It's also about the issue of what are the outcomes of those who made it. Another issue I also want us to think about is what are the causes of the low tertiary level enrollment rate on the continent? A number of reasons have been adduced to the causes of low enrollment, but one of those that I'm going to speak to is the issue of limited household incomes. Because of the poverty issues affecting households, a good number of people who made it started at the primary educational level are not able to fund their way to secondary and tertiary educational level. The other issue is the issue of quality instruction that begins at the primary educational level and largely accounts for reasons why many people drop out of the primary educational level, especially when they sit for the exams that is meant to translate them into the secondary educational level. It's been found out that a good number of those kids actually fail the exam, and that a good number of those who made it to the secondary school are not able to make it to the university education, partly because they were not able to pass the exams that to get them admitted into the tertiary educational institution on the continent. And this issue of poor quality instruction is related to a number of issues. It is related to the issue of teachers' education at the primary level. It's related to the issue of poor quality teachers' education at the secondary level, and to the issue of poor quality teacher at the tertiary level, meaning that there's a specific problem of low quality teachers that are taking care, that are in charge of the education of the kids of the primary, secondary, and the higher educational level, and the tertiary educational level on the subcontinent. And aside the issue of teachers' education, poor teachers' quality, there's also the problem of poorly resourced educational system. Because when you look at the educational system in Africa, it's characterized by a lot of funding issues. And funding issues are not just at the primary level, they also are massive The issue of funding is also massive at the secondary educational level and at the tertiary educational level. And this is largely because of the funding gap, particularly from federal government budgetary allocations to education on the continent. And this is based on an argument that Africa is faced with multiple challenges and they have limited resources, financial resources, that can be used to address many of those multiple challenges affecting education on the continent. So there is a need for prioritization of what needs to get certain budgetary attention on the high side compared to the other. And one of the arguments by the people that are advising African government at different levels, apologies for that. One of the issues for this is that the African government, they've prioritized the funding of other things. They've prioritized the funding of infrastructure. They've prioritized the funding of the healthcare system relatively compared to the educational system on the continent. Because the neoliberal argument is that African government should focus their budgetary allocations on other things outside of the education. It's been argued that the education should be left to the private sector. And we shall come to the consequence of this on the development of the continent of Africa. One of the issues that I would like to discuss before I actually go into the issue of other challenges affecting the continent is the issue of learning outcomes on the African continent. One of the things we've been able to find is that because of the poor primary educational level, the issue of the poor secondary educational level on the continent, and the issue of the poor tertiary education that is available on the continent, Africa, particularly at the elementary level, the high school level, is producing more certificated literate than other parts of the world. It's producing people that have low level of proficiency in basic skills in the aspect of reading and in the aspect of mathematics. And when you look at these slides, you begin to see that generally, the proficiency level of people from low-income countries compared to people from lower or middle-income countries and upper middle-income countries and higher middle-income countries across the world differs. Those in the lower income countries tend to have low proficiency level. And particularly when you pay attention to the data in Africa, Africa has one of the least in the world, the least proficiency level in the aspect of reading. And Africa also has the least proficiency level in the aspect of mathematics. And this data specifically applies to kids who have completed their elementary educational level. That is considered the grade 6 educational level in the United States, and which is considered the primary 6 educational level on the continent of Africa. Another data I'd like to share with us is this, and I've spoken about this, is about the number of people that actually drop out of the educational system in Africa. Because I mentioned that a good number of people get enrolled into the primary educational level, but when it gets to the secondary educational level, a good number of them will drop out of school. And when you get to the tertiary educational level, an increased much more number of people get out of school on the continent of sub-Saharan Africa, in sub-Saharan Africa. And you can compare this with the data that is coming from Latin America. You can also compare it with the data that is coming from other parts of the world. You begin to see that Africa is on the lower part of the curve. And that I want us to also have at the back of our mind. So we are dealing with two issues now. We are dealing with the issue of certificated illiterate who completed primary education. And we're also dealing with the declining number of people who are dropping out of primary educational level, increasing number of people who are dropping out of secondary educational level, who couldn't make it to secondary education, and increasing number of people who couldn't make it to higher, to tertiary education in different parts of the continent. A regional assessment by World Development report. A regional report by World Development, a regional report by one of the leading international development agencies in the world, specifically also supported my claim on the issue of primary six proficiency record in Africa. And as you can see on the slide, 50% of those in West Africa and Central Africa at the primary six level don't have proficiency in English language. The data is on the improved side when you go to Eastern and South African countries, where about 7% are not proficient in the reading of reading at the primary after they've completed their primary six education. And a higher number of primary school leavers lack required mathematics and reading knowledge. And for example, in that same study, it was also realized that the enormity of the problem is such that if the business as usual situation continues in some African country, it will take about 180 years for kids, especially in Tunisia, to reach the average math proficiency level in European countries. And this is the data that we need to keep at the back of our mind as well. Meaning that the level of education for that average basic math proficiency to be attained in a country in Africa like Tunisia, if they continue with the current business as usual situation, it's going to take them 180 years. With that meaning that they might not be able to overcome the development challenges affecting them in Tunisia. And this applies to different levels in different African countries. Another data I'd like to share with us, still on this proficiency matter, this proficiency deficiency at the primary educational level in Africa is the one on this slide. And these are some country specifics. You can see that in countries like Nigeria Republic, in countries like Chad, in countries like Togo, a good number of the kids that completed primary six education, they don't have competency. They have no competency in reading. Extremely low competency in reading. And a good number of them are not even competent in the aspect of reading. The same thing applies to mathematics. Of course, a few countries are doing relatively better, but this data enables us to see the abysmal condition, vis-a-vis the proficiency level of folks who completed primary educational level in Africa. With that meaning that if a good number of these kids gets to secondary school education, you'll be carrying over some basic deficiency in the educational that you receive at the primary educational level, which is going to affect the quality, their ability to actually cope with the education that is offered to them at the secondary school level. And with that likely to affect the quality of people that eventually make their ways into the educational system in Africa, at the tertiary educational level in Africa. And that is why many times when we read about many arguments in newspapers in different African countries, there's this argument that a good number of the graduates are not employable. And many times we focus on the quality of education that is offered to those kids, to the people, to the students in African universities. We hardly ask the question, what is the quality of those education? What is the quality of those kids that get admission, that get admitted into universities, into polytechnics, into different higher educations in Africa? And this is one of the issues that lay down the foundation of graduates that are not employable, because they have severely deficient, grossly ineffective, grossly, defective education from the primary educational system that they carry over the secondary educational system, and they also carry through the higher educational system on the continent. Another data I'd like to share with us, still on this same issue, is that about 128 million school-age children in Africa. We have about 128 million school-age children in Africa. And out of this, 17 million will never make it to school. for different reasons. And out of this as well, another 97 million will enter school of time. But of those, 37 million will not learn basic skills. Basic skills either in terms of reading, basic skills either in terms of mathematics, basic skills either in terms of sciences or what have you. And again, 14 million, data has shown us that 14 million of those 128 million will enter school lately in Africa, of which 33.6 million will not learn anything, even when they make it to school, for different reasons. And this should be concerning us, because it's telling us that a good percentage of the population of youth, of kids in Africa, are either not able to make it to school, or when they make it to school, they are not actually getting anything significant in school that will contribute to improving their own personal human capital. And that will also contribute to improving the human capital of people in Africa. And this is very important because the country is growing. I'd like to ask if there is anybody who likes to make either one contribution or the other at this material point in time in the presentation. If you'd like to come in to make some point or the other, please kindly raise your hand, and I'll be glad to release the floor for you to make one contributions or the other.
Ghana, I have a comment to make.
Okay, please go ahead.
Yeah, so thank you for your presentation. This is really insightful. You know, my worry is that every year this data comes out and the statistics and all the regressions are done to show the poor nature of our educational system, but nothing is done. You know, the problems you just stated here, I saw it when I was in primary school. I went to public school. I was amazed that some of my mates couldn't read and write. Fortunately for me, I was able to have like some private tutors alongside who will help me. But I completed school with some people who couldn't read and write. And I've been reflecting on it recently when I saw your presentation. I was like, but you know, nothing was done to help these people. You know, it's like you just come in, what happened after school, you're on your own. And you and I will know that many of the people on the continent, like as you said, poverty is a problem. But what are the extra things that the government are doing in terms of investment, providing the right resources? Because even the schools that you and I attended are still using the same old infrastructure, the same old teaching techniques, while the world is moving forward. So what is wrong with our leaders? Why have they paid deaf ears to all the problems confronting our educational system, knowing that the future is education, the future is STEM education, the future is science and technology? And if we don't build the capacity of the young people at this time that they are in school, then we are missing out on significant economic growth in the future.
I mean, thank you so much, Eva. I agree with your talking point, and we all know the problems are there, but I think sometimes the severity of the problem is lost on us and our leaders as well. And I think also the leaders understand the magnitude of the educational crisis in Africa. But I think sometimes it's also about the issue of solutions, you know, not knowing the right solutions to the problem, or giving priority to issues that shouldn't be given, you know, top-notch priority. And when you look at this issue of funding, which is one of the issues I'm going to discuss later in my presentation today, you begin to realize that the amount of budgetary allocation to education in Africa has been increasing, obviously, for some time. But when you look at the amount that is dedicated to supporting education in Africa, it's lower compared to other parts of the world. And I think this is one area that UNESCO and many civil society advocates has been making a lot of noise, calling the attention of African government to why they need to fund education. And I'll give you a very good example. And you know, one of the things they've been telling them is that government need to focus on other issues that are important for development. They will tell them government need to borrow money, you know, to fund infrastructure. They will tell them government need to borrow money to do this, to do that. But nobody is taking that government should borrow money to fund education in Africa. Because they know that when you fix the problem of education in Africa, it's very possible that Africa will be one of the most developed continents in the world. But that has not been the case. So funding has been one of those issues. And we've not been able to find solutions around the issue of funding. And besides the issue of, the issue of funding education in Africa, there are other issues too that governments across different African countries, they've not paid a lot of attention to. And one of those, in my opinion, is the issue of teachers' education, which is one of the culprits that is responsible for the low level of educational attainment and the low level of low quality education at the primary educational level, at the secondary educational level, and at the tertiary educational level in different African countries. For example, as shown on this slide, 60% of the primary and 64% of primary school teachers and 50% of secondary school teachers have just minimum required training in sub-Saharan Africa, meaning that a big percentage of the teachers that are teaching in primary and secondary school in Africa, they don't have the required training for them to teach. And this basically applies to public educational system. When I traveled to Malaysia, I saw a huge difference in the commitment of government to funding education, particularly at the primary and the secondary educational level. I realized that the best of schools were the public schools. The public primary schools were the best of schools, the public secondary schools were the best of schools, and the publicly funded university were the best of schools. When I got to the United States, the headquarters of capitalism in the world, I was also surprised by what I witnessed compared to Africa. I thought that private educational system would be the best at the primary and the secondary educational level. But I came to realize that government actually made education to be free at the primary and the secondary educational level in the United States. Of course, they have their own challenges, but the policy they are advancing, they are proposing to leaders in Africa is to withdraw from funding education at all levels, increasingly withdraw. And the more the government withdraw from funding primary education, the more the government withdraw from funding secondary education in Africa, the more the problem of education is being affected. And that part of funding education is that it's not just funding primary and secondary schools. It's also funding the feeding mechanism through which teachers are produced to teach in those schools. When you underfund education at the tertiary educational level, the implication is that you'll be producing teachers who are well equipped to train our kids at the primary and the secondary educational level. And that is why the problem of our substandard teachers is a massive one that is constraining the development of education on the continent. So I like to ask, is there any other person that also wants to make another contribution? Hello? You can use the raise hand button.
Yes, I think.
Yeah, it seems you have a problem with your internet.
Yeah, Hamid should go. Hamid, unmute yourself.
Hamid, do you want to unmute yourself?
I think I've done that. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. Please go ahead.
Great. Yeah, I must thank you, Dr. Ghana, for the presentation. You have really painted the true picture of the problems we have in Africa with respect to education. But I want to just spice it a little bit with some of the real-life situations, real-life examples that speaks to the depth of the problem of education in Africa. I want to remind us about the case of a primary school teacher who could not even read what is on the paper. A primary school teacher in Edo State was asked to read the content of an affidavit, and she was reading and was not reading correctly. Specifically, she was to read, "I solemnly declare." The teacher said, "I solemnly declare." And that speaks to the point you raised, that the quality of the teachers is a big issue. And as you said, government is not funding primary education. Of course, in Nigeria, you know, it's pathetic to note that the Nigerian government has actually has abandoned primary education for the local government. The local government is the third level of government in Nigeria. And then this level of government, you know, get the least, of the share of the national cake every month. And even the state government, many of these state governors are sitting on the funds that are meant to go directly to the local government. So what we have are leaders who do not care about the educational sector. They don't want it to develop. They are only interested in embezzling the public fund to send their own children and words to good schools in Europe and in America. And this is very pathetic. I'm still going to I'll be speaking to some of the things we could do, but I will allow you as the lead speaker to lead us into that. But really, we have a lot of problems that are, so big that you think about a solution today, the next morning when you wake up, you'll be wondering if your thought of yesterday can still really solve the problem.
Ghana,
So
I want to
stop here for now.
Okay. Ghana, I want to call on Ishmael. Ishmael, if you are here, can you comment on the national teachers policy that the Uganda government has introduced to standardize the training of teachers? Can you elaborate on it?
Ishmael, the floor is yours. I think he's having some problem with his internet. But on the chat box, he actually made some contributions. He said that even with the introduction of universal secondary education in Uganda, there is still low completion rates, meaning that completion rate is still a major issue. Oh yeah, please go ahead. Ganya, please go ahead.
Yeah. The national teacher policy in my country, it is they have given a task that is working upon it to standardize the teaching profession. But one of the things that it is bringing is that we are most likely from this year, 2020, is the last time that now they are training teachers of primary schools with certificates. They have decided to upgrade. Originally, from all level, the primary teachers would join primary teachers colleges. But they have decided that now, because it looks like it is substandard now, they're trying to upgrade that now to go to primary teachers college, you must have you must have studied up to senior 6. And that means you are going to join and then earn a degree in primary education. And they are giving an alternum of about 10 years for those who graduated with grade 3 to have upgraded up to degree level. So that is one of the things that is under the teacher policy, but they are still working upon it, and they intend to start by 2021. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your contribution, Kanya. And this is one of the efforts that is being made. Thank you for speaking to one of the efforts that is being made to address the problem of teachers' quality in Uganda. And I also want to appreciate the comment by Violet, Peter, and other people that have been commenting on the chat box, which is relatively busy over here. And one of the comments that Violet actually made is that teachers' salary is also a huge concern. And I'll be getting to that as well. She mentioned specifically that wages are a critical determinant of motivation. And at least for the case of Uganda, teachers are paid peanuts, and the effort towards collective action for better pay have gone unrewarded. This eventually has a trickle-down effect on the quality of students, particularly in public government schools. Public policy needs to prioritize teachers' pay if government wants to see improvement in the quality of their students. And I think this is one of the issues in Africa. And we shall come to discuss more about this when we get to what needs to be done. Because many times we talk about teachers' pay. And the question has always been from the government perspective, they are willing to do this, but you don't have the resources to make it happen. So what are the ways we can creatively look into this problem and address this problem? And I think this is where the conversation really needs to be. Because many people will tell you, yeah, we recognize that the need for us to improve significantly the payment of teachers' salary. But the question is, how do we do this? Knowing fully well that the continent is faced with significant funding challenges. And another issue that is concerning the educational system in Africa is the issue of educational financing and the efficiency of educational financing. And specifically, I'll be focusing on the issue of financing efficiency of education, of the educational financing efficiency in Africa. What we've been able to find out is that 58% of the funding that is allocated to the primary educational system is efficient in terms of the decision to fund this, the decision to fund that. Meaning that the decision of what to fund, what not to fund, and how to use the funding is crucially deficient, is crucially problematic at the primary educational level on the continent. And the number is even worse off when you get to the secondary educational level, meaning that what the government is funding, how they are using the available funding to solve the educational issues, to fund education at secondary educational level, is also abysmal on the continent. And when you compare this with the data from across the world, you begin to realize that African government is not just the problem of issue of insufficient educational budgetary allocation. It's also the issue of inefficiency in the usages of the fund that is allocated to the educational system. When you look at the data comparatively with other parts of the world, you come to see that Africa has the lowest efficiency at the primary educational level, and funding efficiency as well, and that's one of the lowest, and has the lowest funding educational efficiency at the secondary educational level. We can begin to see the efficiency level in Asia is almost at par with that of the European Union. And that possibly explains why some of the development growth we are beginning to experience in Asia is making us to see that Asian countries are fast moving above many of their development challenges. You can also see it here at the secondary educational level, that Latin American countries are also doing well, and they are even doing better than Asian countries, and they are moving almost at par with European countries. And where is Africa on this list? Africa is underperforming, severely underperforming to other parts of the world. And that's another thing we need to think about, that the little amount of money that is being allocated to the educational system in Africa, how efficiently are they being utilized? How efficiently are they being allocated to issues that should demand attention on the continent? And the basic question, how is efficiency defined? What is efficient and should be efficient to us in Africa? What should be the metrics that we use to measure if we are efficiently utilizing and allocating the little budgetary allocations to education on the continent? These are issues of concerns that we need to wrap our head about in Africa as intellectuals on the continent. So the issue of inefficient use, inefficient allocation of funding to the educational system in Africa is another big one that is constraining education on the subcontinent. Having discussed, some of the issue, I say that before I move on to the next point, I'd like to give the floor to Pascal, who has raised his hand and would like to make some contribution. Pascal, do you want to unmute yourself and make a contribution?
Yes, thank you very much, Ghana. Good afternoon, everyone, or good morning, whatever. Now, I just want to observe that declining education systems can in fact be linked to the high unemployment of graduates. With so many graduates being churned out of our universities and then they don't get employment. So at the end of the day, those people who find their way into the informal sector, like in gold panning, and in other activities like buying and selling, are actually better off than the graduates who come out of our university colleges. And so this tends to demotivate the young ones and dissuade them from proceeding further with education. And then we also have curricula which is irrelevant to the development needs of Africa. In many countries, we do have graduates who are actually churned out, but whose qualifications are not necessarily relevant to the needs of Africa. And so that is tended to present problems with our education system. And then people who train as teachers, in most cases, are not called. They do not have the passion. They do so absolutely out of the need for money, just for employment. And so at the end of the day, whatever they are doing is not out of passion. It doesn't help very much to motivate our children to want to learn. Yes, I think this is my bit, which I'm contributing at the moment. Thank you so much.
Yeah, so thank you so much for those wonderful points, Pastor. And one of the things that you really emphasize and is the issue of high unemployment of graduates from African universities and tertiary educations generally. And one of the issues that the private sector has always made as a problem, has always cited as a problem with African graduates, is that they are not employable. They believe that they lack the basic skills. And one of the reasons why they lack the basic skills is what we've spoken about today. It's because the education that they receive at the primary level, the education that they receive at the secondary level, the education that they receive at the tertiary level is structurally defective. And the foundation of the education at the primary level is defective. The defectiveness is carried over to the secondary level, where the defectiveness is further complicated. And the defectiveness at the secondary level is also carried over to the university level, where the defectiveness is aggravated as well. So you see aggravation of defectiveness at different layers of the educational system in Africa. So at the end of the day, it's very possible that somebody has completed a tertiary education and lacks the basic skills needed by employers. It will even be the issue of just writing some basic letter, just writing, putting together some business contractual agreement and being unable to do that. It could be the problem of solving basic mathematical problem, being unable to do that. It could be any problem. And that is why the private sector or the subcontinent, they prefer not to employ. Because when you employ somebody who's not able to get the job done, you're going to run out of business, and you don't want to run out of businesses. So it might be one of the reasons why the unemployment, level rate is very high on the subcontinent. And every single time, the government is making an effort to address the problem on unemployment in Africa, education is hardly a priority agenda for them. They always focus on how do we create more jobs for them. Is it about creating more jobs? Yes, it's about creating more jobs. But it's also about addressing the issue of defective education that people acquire at the primary level, defective education that people acquire at the secondary level, and defective education that people acquire at the higher institution level. If you are able to address the problem of defective education, Africans won't be talking about creating more jobs. Africa will be producing people that will be producing jobs. So one of the problems with our educational system is that we've not been turning out job producers. We've been turning out certificated illiterate, half-educated literate. And this is further compounding the attractiveness for employment by the private sector folks. And this is one of the issues that requires a lot of attention on the continent. And Ganya, do you want to make some points? Yeah, you have the floor.
Okay.
Please speak louder.
About unemployment and the quality of teachers. Private schools in this country, in my country, Uganda, they have picked another model that because of unemployment, teachers who are from secondary background, they have decided to go into primary schools. But what has been interesting is that the quality has improved with the teachers who are trained for degree from secondary, who have degrees. And therefore, some private schools have decided now on a new model whereby they employ secondary teachers with a secondary background, and then leaving these teachers from primary schools who have graduated from teacher training colleges. And I think that is the reason as to why the government has decided that at least let it now train primary teachers with degrees, because they have seen the advantage of a degree teacher than a certificate teacher. Thank you.
So thank you so much. That was a very brilliant point. It's also an addition to the conversation we are having. But the other point you also want to know is...
I'll say something.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Well, my intervention is that, you see, we're talking about why some of these people are not employable. I think one of the fundamental reasons is that, like in Nigeria, I know for a fact that some departments are using outdated curriculums. So we have to go back and review some of these curriculums. If we're able to review some of these curriculums, we can make best use of the little we have, but that is one. Then two, for some of these public, like the public schools around Nigeria, there is this problem of supervision. The supervision is very, very weak because the people who are employed there are related to some big people in government. Because they're related to some people in government, nobody supervises them. But the private school, because if you take a roll call in terms of those who are qualified, who should be teaching in schools, you will discover that you find quite a good number of them in public schools. But the issue is most of them are just given these jobs just to go there as a way of settling them, not because they really want to do the job, but because they have one big Oga somewhere on top. So I think these are just my take for now.
Thank you, Mr. Austin, for that very important point. And that goes back to the issue of corruption that Mr. Hamid is mentioning. That is another issue that is nullifying. It has a nullifying effect, on the whatever effort the government is making to address the problem of education. And corruption plays out in different ways. It plays out in the context of who gets employed, even as a teacher in our various schools, primary school, secondary school, and even our university. And it also affects the people that get employed to enforce, the standards in our primary, secondary, and higher education. And part of enforcing standard is the role of supervisory roles that people that work at government agency plays in our various schools in Africa. And Ganya was making a very important point. And I think the other point, the other dimension to that point is the issue of who are those that get employed as teachers. And to ask these questions, to answer this question, there are many things we need to look at. One of the things we need to look at is to first ask the question, what are the mechanisms, what are the avenues through which teachers are produced in Africa? Teachers are produced through teachers education schools, like maybe they have some schools that are dedicated to producing teachers, maybe like a Teachers Institute, College of Education, and what have you. We need to ask this question, what is the quality of people that get admitted as students into our colleges of education? What is the quality of those folks? Are they the best of the best? Are they individuals who actually want to study education because they want to contribute to addressing the problem of education in Africa, helping to move education to the next level? Or are they those who find it difficult to get admitted into different schools, and at the end of the day, they made admission into colleges of education, into educational program in our university as their last resort? I think this is one of the problems that the government in Africa is not paying a lot of attention to. They've not been asking the question, how do we get the best of the best into our colleges of education? Because what I understand is that when you have the best of the best attending colleges of education, enrolling into educational program in a different university, it's more likely that we have more qualified teachers who will be willing to teach, who will be available for employment in our primary and secondary school. will be available for employment even in our universities. Because in our days, back at the University of Lagos when I was a student, one of the jokes we used to crack is this, that the best of us won't come back to become professors in the university. That the best of us want to make good money. And to make that good money, we don't see the opportunity in the universities. We don't see the opportunity in the educational sectors. What we saw was that the opportunity was in the banking sector. And that is why somebody who completed an engineering degree ends up working in the banking sector in countries like Nigeria. Somebody who completed a computer science degree ended up working in the banking sector in Nigeria. So you begin to realize that a good number of those who are meant to return back to the university, to give back, to teach, to help elevate the level of education, they don't return. So the employment to fill those spaces is now based on making do with the available, because the desirable, they are not obtainable. They are not available for employment. They've made themselves available to other sectors because the educational system is not able to fund them. So we spend a lot of time on what are the problems and what are the issues, and we've relatively spent some time discussing what can be done. And I like to move forward on the aspect of what needs to be done. And to me, one of the things that needs to be done is to address the problem of access and deficiency in learning in Africa. And there are many ways we can address this problem. And one of the issues that needs to be first addressed before we can address the problem of access and learning is to address the issue of government and commitment to funding education smartly and efficiently on the continent. And here, I'll be proposing some grand ideas, very simple and stupid ideas that the government in different African countries that they can, implement. One of these is that I will be suggesting that the government in different African countries dedicate certain percentage of the revenue from their major sources of income, of the revenue from their major sources of revenue to educational financing in Africa. For example, Nigeria is a predominantly oil country, oil economy. And I do believe that if certain percentage of the revenue from the oil sector is dedicated to funding education, maybe 2%, maybe 3%, maybe 4%, we may begin to address the issue of, inefficient, insufficient, and inefficient funding of the educational sector. And we can begin to do this at different levels. We can do this at the state level. We can do this at the community level. And communities, and the other way we can also solve this problem is by doing what I call the Diaspora Educational Development Funding. Many times we've read a lot of report that says that the diasporic community in Africa, they are contributing massively to the economy in the continent in many ways. By sending back money to start businesses in their various countries, by supporting the education and the livelihood, even the businesses of their families and friends in different African countries. One of the things that we've not been able to explore on the continent is how we can actually mobilize funds from the diasporic African community to fund the educational system. And I do think this is one of the things that those of us that are currently in the diaspora can begin to brainstorm in terms of how can we mobilize money from the diaspora to support education, either at the primary level, either at the secondary level, or at the tertiary level in Africa. And the African government can create a diaspora education development funding table in their various high commissions in different countries in the world that will work with people from different countries, from their countries, to come together, to put brain together and explore how they can actually mobilize this. If Israel was able to mobilize its diaspora community to advance the development of Israel, Africa can do the same thing by looking inward into this idea of diaspora education development fund that I call the Diaspora School Program. And the other thing we can begin to think about is the issue of introducing what I call the educational taxes. I'm not aware, and it's very possible that some countries in Africa are currently doing this. What I've been thinking is that everybody is bothered. everybody is concerned about the abysmal state of funding that is available to schools in Africa. Parents are worried because they're living with the consequences. Students are worried because they're recipients of underfunded education. Academics are worried, teachers are worried, lecturers are worried. And one of the worry that is cross-cutting across different segments of the African society, of African societies, can be used as a launching pad to engage the conversation on introduction of educational taxes. If you have a property in Africa, let a certain percentage of the taxes you are going to be paying on your property, of your property taxes, be increased, as that educational tax as well. And we can say that we are going to improve the tax that you are paying on your property because we want to take 3% of the increase to support the funding of our educational system. And we can do this across different levels. We can do it across the taxes we collect at the market level. We can do it based on the taxes that we are collecting from personal income. We can also do it on different layers. And I think that is going to bring in mopping a lot of financial resources to help address the problem of shortfall in funding for schools in Africa. And they do this too in developed countries of the world. There's that aspect of the taxes that goes into funding the educational system. Another idea I'll be putting on the table is what I call the Come Back Summer Teach program. And this is leveraging the diaspora academics to address the problem of shortfall of qualified teachers at different layers in different African countries. A good number of them, they like to spend their summer holiday, traveling to different parts of the world. And one of the things African government can do is to launch this initiative. Come back to your country to teach during summertime. If you're a professor in the university, we love to see you spend 2-3 months during your summertime teaching in Africa. They can use the same time to conduct their research, particularly those that are doing studies that are focused on Africa. Those that are involved in teaching, the secondary school, the high school, the college student, and the elementary student, they can also do the same thing. And I believe this is one of the ways that we can bridge the problem of substandard teachers that are all over the place in different African countries. And some of the benefits of this will be this. When teachers come to teach, they will have conversation with their colleagues. They will have discussion with their colleagues about some of the issues that they need to address to improve their teaching quality. That can also facilitate what I call the sharing of resources. It's very possible that those that are coming from the diaspora, they will be making available some resources, personal development resources, that those that are currently teaching at different levels in African universities, primary school, secondary school, can leverage to improve their teaching skills. So this is another idea that I'm bringing to the table. Another idea that I'm bringing to the table is what I call the Diaspora Home Academic Research Program and co-mentoring. What I mean by the Diaspora Home Academic Research Program is this aspect of collaboration, building critical skills that African researchers, African academics need to have to be able to conduct top-notch research, because their colleagues that are in developed countries, either in North America or Europe, they supposedly have research funds that enable them to do quality and extensive research. I believe by having that collaboration, they can work with their counterparts in Africa to be doing research together, and it's going to be a win-win situation. More publications for our counterparts in Africa, they'll be able to be more aware of how to prepare a grant-winning proposal. They'll be able to be more aware of those methodologies that will assist them to do groundbreaking research. They'll be able to equip themselves in areas of gaps in the aspect of research. And in the aspect of co-mentoring, we can work remotely to co-mentor students that are doing research, either at the doctoral level, either at the undergraduate level in African universities. We can work out a system whereby those of us that are working currently in North America and in different parts of the world outside of Africa, we can be on the mentoring committee, on the supervision committee of students that are doing their PhD, or students that are doing their master's program. And one of the things that this can actually bring us benefit is that it can lead to some of those students being facilitated to come over to use our labs, to use some of our resources here in North America or in Europe. That's one of the areas we can explore to bridge this gap of the quality of research that is being conducted in Africa and the quality of mentoring that students are exposed to when they do their programs, either at the graduate level or undergraduate level in Africa. The other idea that I'm bringing to the table, and it's something that is currently ongoing on the continent, is the issue of mobilizing private sector funds to support educational finance in Africa. And what I'm bringing to the table that appears to me to be novel sort of is that I'll be advocating that we incentivize profit, we socialize profit making by the private sector by incentivizing them to do that. Meaning that, and they've done something similar in Japan in the past, not necessarily to support the educational sector, but to support the development of the economy of the country called Japan. So what they did in Japan was to socialize the issue of profit making. What the government did was that if you make concession of using a greater part of the salary of your profit to increase the salary payable to your employees, the government will give you highly subsidized loans. And I was telling, the private sector that we want you to help improve the livelihood condition of the people, of your employees, by paying them better and by reducing the amount of profit that you're making. And for doing that, the government was going to make available for you cheaper loans. And that is a way of making their business more profitable. We can do the same thing in Africa by socializing profit, by telling the private stakeholders that if you do more funding, if you commit like 10% or 5% of your profit, supposed expected profit to supporting the educational system, this is the way that the government is going to incentivize what you are doing. We'll make available cheaper loans for you. We'll give you tax holiday. We'll reduce the percentage of taxes you're also paying. I mean, we can come up with different ways. We can leverage different financial instruments to make this happen. That's another way I believe we can address some of the problems of funding that are constraining the educational system in Africa. The other one that I also speak to is what I call the Diaspora Educational Development Funding. And I think I've spoken about that. I've spoken about introducing the educational taxes. And the other issue is what people have spoken about, which I call pay them well. We need to pay the teachers well. And we need to figure out how we need to solve this problem. And we also need to fix the problem of the source, which I call fix the source, which is the problems of teachers' education. It's a massive one in Africa. And one of the ways we can do that is by ensuring that the quality of people that get enrolled in educational programs in Africa, in our various colleges of education, are people that have quality, are quality students who can transfer their quality to improving teaching at the primary level, at the secondary level, and research at the university level. And I think these are some of the ideas that we can potentially implement to address the problem that is constraining the educational system in Africa. I'd like to welcome some contributions from the floor before we eventually close it for the day. Any contributions from the floor?
Yes, Ghana.
Okay.
So I thank you for the presentation again. It was really good. I like the recommendations that you projected there. One of the things I want to say is that has to do with trust and accountability. You spoke about the fact that there is a need for diaspora educational funding to be introduced to help with the financing of our education on the continent of Africa. Well, I know a lot of people here that are interested in that, but they've raised a lot of concern with the issue of how they can hold those teachers and those educational institutions where they fund them, they can hold them accountable. And this has stemmed from the fact that some of the people in the diaspora have mobilized money to help some schools on the continent. But when they go back to ask for how the money was used, provide us with receipt, they can't get it. So this discourages people to actually fund educational institutions. And what they mostly do is to buy some textbooks, buy some exercise books to go and give it to the children. And they feel like that is enough. And this is, as I said, this has to do with the lack of trust that some of the people in the diaspora have with some of the leaders on the continent, because when they give them the money to finance the educational system and they go back to ask for accountability, how the money was used, there's nothing to show for it. So how do we address this issue?
So that's a very good one. There are ways these issues can be addressed. And one of the art is to look at, to create a system that will incorporate folks from the diaspora that work with the government to ensure transparency and efficiency in how those funds are being spent. If people have been mobilizing money and sending it to schools, maybe something needs to change about that. Is it just about mobilizing money? Or is it about mobilizing money and putting in place the mechanisms through which that money can be monitored? And there are ways that can be done by creating platforms that fosters, transparency in the judicious usage of those funds. And one of the ways we can do that is by asking that we leverage the electronic platforms to make that possible, and to create a committee that people from communities will be involved in, that people from the diaspora will be part of the committee, and that different stakeholders, including those that are non-governmental organizations, will be part of it. Because when you include some of those critical stakeholders and those from the diaspora, it's very possible that the funds will be judiciously used. For many times, such funds, they are just spent by government or by the administrator of those schools. I don't know how they do it in Ghana, and I'm not aware of any such idea that is currently going on in Nigeria. And I'd like to hear from Ganya if he has any thought about this, because I noticed that he raised his hand, possibly he would like to make some contribution. So I will talk. I will go for the idea of putting in place a transparent system that is membered by people from the diaspora, by stakeholders from parents, communities, by stakeholders from the civil society organization that work with the government to monitor such funds. And I think if we do, it's very possible that some of these problems of corruption and misuse of such funds can be addressed. So that's one idea that I potentially will call to. Gaia, do you want to make a contributions?
Yes. Thank you very much.
Do you want to speak louder, please?
Yes, I'm trying. Do you hear me?
Yeah, please go ahead. Yeah, please go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, so among the solutions you have given, I have looked at the diaspora issue.
Mm-hmm.
And the way I'm looking at it is that whereas you are talking about engaging with the government in terms of giving some finance, but I was also thinking that the diaspora people, with the opportunities they have, like for example, I just think that we are gaining from you having been to the diaspora, such that they connected you into this leadership of Africa. And in other words, we have gained a lot in learning from you. And that means if we can extend that by the diaspora people trying to get opportunities for teachers in terms of, scholarship, because the scholarship issue in terms of improving the grades of teachers, many of the teachers in Africa, they have 1 degree. And they would love to expand their knowledge. And I know people from diaspora, you have opportunities to talk to some professors, and someone may try to bring in his CV, and in a way, this teacher can come over for about 2-3 years, and then when he comes back, he can improve. And I think that one that one, it is in the hands of those people in the diaspora directly, because they can even give accommodation, they can give, and then I just think that one could help a lot, in my opinion. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I mean, that was a very brilliant idea, and it further expands the confines of my thought on that, the issue of leveraging the diaspora community for various purposes that will help move the educational system in Africa. We spoke about the Diaspora Home Academic Research Program and the Diaspora Home Academic co-mentoring of students who are doing their doctoral program in Africa and who are also doing their undergraduate research in Africa. And the other one, which you actually mentioned, is to go the way of leaders of Africa. Because one of the things we do at the Leaders of Africa, one of the several things we do at the Leaders of Africa as a way of contributing to addressing the development challenges on the continent is by offering graduate level research method classes that start sometimes in the middle of the year and run through the end of the year. And there's also what we call the research mentoring program, where students are given individualized and customized research mentoring for up to 4 months. That enables them to acquire the kinds of education that they will acquire when they do research method classes at the graduate level, the doctoral level, in any universities across the world, including in the United States and in Europe. And I strongly agree with you that we can replicate the same thing at the continent level by having academics from developed countries in Europe and even in some part of Asia, in North America, Canada, and United States, teach classes electronically in Africa. But we need to address the issue of the necessary infrastructure that will make it possible for them to teach some of these classes remotely. And I think this is one of the ways we can also leverage the diaspora community. And this is one thing that the African government needs to look into. Maybe if somebody is teaching a class or teaching a class with a professor, with another professor in African university, I think it's going to have some, impact on the quality of education on the continent. Is there any other person that like to make one or two contributions? And as I call our attention to some of the materials that are being released on the Leaders on the chat platform, we have various social media platforms that we encourage us to join. We have the Discourse community. We have our YouTube channel that we encourage you to subscribe to. We also have our Facebook page that we also encourage you to subscribe to. We have our Instagram account that we also encourage you to subscribe to follow us on Instagram. And we are also available on Twitter. And we're also available on LinkedIn. And we'd like you to participate in all of those platforms because we have several different information that we disseminate, including opportunities for education abroad. In the United States, that will disseminate through different platforms of the Leaders of Africa. Before we eventually call it a day, I'd like to welcome one more comment, if at all there is any. Is there anybody that wants to make a comment before I close it for the day? Gloria, do you like to make a comment?
Oh, no, I don't have anything to say. Thank you. I've learned so much from this amazing presentation. Thank you, Ghana.
So we'd like to call it today, and thank you everyone for participating in today's conversation. We are going to make it available on the YouTube. You can share the link with your friends and colleagues, and we encourage you to follow different activities of the Leaders of Africa. We have the Hangouts program that takes place. This Hangout program takes place every 2 weeks, meaning that the next one is going to take place in a fortnight. And we also have what we call this week that is going to be taking place this coming weekend. We encourage you to participate in the program on Saturday. And this is an opportunity for us, to be part of the conversation. We have a team that discusses issues of different, dimensions on the continent, ranging from pop culture to the issues of politics, to the issue of economy, to the issue of election, to the issue of, advocacy for the benefit of the continent. So we encourage you to be part of that very interesting program. You can always watch it live on YouTube. And we also hold some live broadcasts, but sometimes once in a while, that will bring some of these important stakeholders in different African agencies working with different level on the continent. to engage conversations on issues of importance to the continent. And at the Leaders of Africa, we also have what we call the Leaders of Africa Institute that is coordinating, top-notch, offering top-notch education to support human capital for sound knowledge production on the continent of Africa. Every other year, we always roll out information calling for admission of students into our Leaders of Africa research program that, I was talking about. We have a lot of the participants who are part of this program, and a good number of them, they've been able to make their ways to universities in the US, doing their PhD, doing their masters, and the further knowledge that we receive at the Leaders of Africa are very instrumental to their continued academic development. We are here to support the development of the continent. We thank you for your participation, and we look forward to meeting with you some other time. Bye. Thank you.